Good evening and welcome to Livid Comics Lair. Tonight's guest is a writer of graphic novel That Texas Blood with Image Comics. Started out as doing some screenplays and some screenwriting that translated over into comics. So we're pretty excited to talk through some of how that worked mechanically, also that series, That Texas Blood. So please welcome our friend, Mr. Chris Condon.
You guys in your thumbs up.
What's up, man?
Cool.
Welcome to this
Intro.
Yeah, that's fun. Crazy.
Yeah.
Good time. Well, welcome everybody. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Very good, thank you.
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys?
Oh,
Great.
good. You know, we these 8 o'clock start times Eastern time are a little. It's like it's Russian roulette here in the Durgan household, because I have a 7-year-old and 3-year-old. So I'm like, am I gonna get these freaking kids down in time before the show starts, for bed? So my son was swinging a dog toy around in the kitchen. I'm like, stop, and he hit a. Hey there. He hit a box of macaroni on the counter, went everywhere. Just thousands of pieces of macaroni all over the floor. So I was cleaning that up 10 minutes before showtime. So here we are. So
Hey, well, it happens.
welcome to dadhood. Yeah.
Right.
By the
Awesome.
way, if you hear any barking, that is my dog in the back.
Bring on the show. Oh, good.
What type of dog you got?
You want any part of that?
Yeah.
I don't. What was that?
What type of dog you got?
Oh, he's a pit bull.
Oh, nice. I got a
Yeah,
1-year-old boxer.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, his name is Obi. He's a sweet boy, but he also barks and jumps up and But he is a really sweet boy. We love him.
That's cool.
But is he ready for a podcast?
This podcast, maybe. No.
Yeah.
Maybe.
This will be his intro. Thanks for coming on. I reached out to you. I'm a huge fan of the series, obviously. So it was cool to get you on here and chat about it. So I don't recall if I told you. Yeah. Guys, is there a delay on me, by the way? Because okay, well, I just want, that's happened before, and I just want to make sure it's good. But yeah, so I didn't discover this series until the trade version was out for volume 1. So I got behind in the next batch of books. So I'm sitting here and I'm trying not to get spoiled by anything because unfortunately I got so far behind that now I have to wait for the trade volume 2 to come out, which I've already pre-ordered, but
Well, I thank you for pre-ordering that. I tweeted today, and it's true. I actually just got the final files for the second volume trade, and it's going to be a really nice trade. I think our first trade is actually pretty nicely designed. Jacob did that himself. Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool looking book. And I think the second trade is going to be even better. It's a little longer.
Wow. Nothing wrong with that.
I think it's not much long, but it's a little bit longer. But it's just the design of it is really done well.
Right.
I guess that's what happens when you have the Phillips blood.
Right.
That
Right.
Phillips blood.
I'm a fan of it because it keeps the kids from damaging them as much as the floppies, right? So that's okay. Let them flip through them. It's not so bad. So,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Well, I don't disagree with that because with the individual issues, I'm trying to board and bag them all, and it's a little bit more of a pain to pick one up and read it. But with the trade, you could just fly through that whole thing. So I read most of this in 2 sittings.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
The thing for the trade that I was just flipping through it. You know, I had already read the previous version, which was missing some corrections that we had done later on. So I had to read through it, and then I just had to read through it quickly the second time. And I think it's kind of, I really like the back matter that we put in the floppies. And obviously there's the letter pages and all that, but the trade doesn't have that stuff in it. And I almost kind of it's fun to read like a floppy, read the back matter, and then wait a month and then get the next one, right? But with the trade, it is kind of nice to just read through the whole story just in one sitting, in one volume. It is just, I don't know. There's something satisfying about that in its own way.
Pros and cons, right? It's like the Netflix of comics. You just binge it.
I guess so. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Netflix, the binging, TV binging. My girlfriend can attest to this. I'm not the biggest TV binger. Like, I'll watch an episode and I probably won't finish anything. I'm slow at it. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm just like built to watch movies.
Yeah.
I watch like a thing and then I'm like, okay, I'm done with it. Whereas like a show, you got to sit there for like 6 hours and watch that, or longer, and watch this whole thing, or split it up. And if I split things up, I never finish it. I'm bad.
They got it on lockdown too. It's a total formula because it's always that cliffhanger end, and they start it like 4 seconds right after the one end. So then you get sucked into the next one. They don't roll the whole credits, and then it goes dark and waits. Like, nope, you're right on the next one whether you want to or not. So yeah, they got that formula.
Exactly.
Then you're 5 minutes into that one, like, well, hell with it at this point. I might as well go the other 40 and finish this one. It just keeps going.
Man,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I'm a serial, half-finished episode fall asleep on the couch guy. So like my wife hates that about me. She'll look over and I'll just be out, and she'll be like, "John, you said you weren't tired." I'm like, "I'm sorry," but yeah.
Yeah, the last show that I've actually watched in full was Midnight Mass, which is pretty good.
I loved it.
Yeah. I'm a big Lock and Key fan. I don't know if you caught that. That's Joe Hill.
I haven't watched it, but I've read the comic.
Comics.
I enjoy the comics a lot.
Comics, I would give it like a 9/10. Am I rating the show? Maybe a 7. I mean, it's fun, but a totally different storyline. And one thing I was thinking about, you had mentioned another show about maybe getting into doing some Revolutionary War era stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're alluding to that in the comics and also in the series where they're going to be going into that timeline.
Oh, interesting.
More, right? So the Long family is multi-generational, so they can span over that time frame and go to different eras like that. Stories.
Yeah, they just did that World War I spinoff. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read the first issue of it, and I liked that a lot. I really just like the artwork a lot in it too. Just peering over it.
Sandman tie-in, was that the one? Was that the Sandman crossover? Was that they did that one too?
I think it was something. I think it was just a standalone Lock and Key mini. It might have been from a year ago or two.
Yeah, I think it was the little boy, right? He was going through and wanted to.
Yeah. You're guys hearing my dog in the background?
It's all good, man.
He's all right.
Yeah, they use that same characters in the Sandman crossover. Something happened.
Oh, okay.
The brother, I read a lot of stuff. So if it happens with the brother, and then like the sister's trying to make a deal to talk to her brother on the other side through Sandman characters. It's a crossover. So it's wild. It's cool. It's good. It's well done.
No, I mean that's the wonderful thing about comics, and I guess they're sort of adopting that for TV and even movies now. Is that sort of crossover mentality?
Yeah.
He has a lot to say about Lock and Key.
He's been watching it, he loves it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's got a perspective on the Lock family. And,
yeah.
But I really do think that that's an interesting thing that is sort of transcending mediums now. Because I mean, you don't really see too many movies in the past that were, not only just jumping from like movie to movie to movie to movie like the Marvel universe is doing now, Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you want to call it that, or the Snyder universe as well. But I mean, you don't even see, like they're doing now like multi-generational movies where you're seeing like obviously the new Spider-Man movies having characters from 2002 coming back in a movie in 2022 or 2021, I guess. But it's it's like really weird. But that's the kind of stuff that comics has been doing since I don't know, like the JSA, like way back when in the 40s. Like this is something that comics was way ahead of everybody on, and again, comics is they're still not given the respect that they deserve, I think. I mean, the it's scary. It's scary for me, but yeah, I don't know. It's weird for me to see sort of like the sort of IP farming thing. Like you hear claims of like IP farming, like they're just trying to make a movie or something.
Yeah.
But I kind of hate that because it's like there would be like that. It's just them admitting to the fact that comics are the lifeblood of cinema and TV.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well,
it's
apparently,
weird,
like
because
the credits of the Eternals is like the first time they even credit like Jack Kirby in anything, like for these Marvel movies, right? Like people were like, "What the hell?" Like he's like a living. Well, he's not a living. He's a legend, and they don't even give this guy credit in the movies, and so at least they finally did that. But for the Eternals,
Bill Finger was even a bigger. I mean, I think Jack Kirby did get credit, but maybe solo credit is what you might be referring to. But the Bill Finger was a big, he was just a forgotten figure for a very long time in the cinematic universe, because Bob Kane was the only one who was getting credit for creating Batman, when it was really Bill Finger who had more of a hand in creating Batman than Bob Kane ever did. I mean, Bob Kane drew it, but all of the ideas it's the opposite of what it usually is, which is usually it's the writer takes more credit and the artist, gets sort of the short shrift. But it's the opposite with Batman, where it was the writer who, came up with the bat costume, the utility belt, like all of the stuff that we associate with being Batman was Bill Finger, not Bob Kane. Bob Kane wanted some guy in a red suit. It wouldn't have been the same thing. So it's really nice that, I think it started with Dawn of Justice that they started giving Bill Finger credit. But really, I mean, think about how many years of movies that had come out that he had just been neglected on. It's really sad. And I mean, it's even more sad when you know about his actual story. I mean, there's a great documentary on, I think it's on Hulu, about Bill Finger.
I'll have to check that out.
But yeah, I mean, he died penniless, alone in an apartment, and Bob Kane wound up wearing a velvet cape to the premiere of Batman in '89. That's a big, stark difference between the two of them.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's nice that creators are getting the respect that they deserve, especially people like you said, like Jack Kirby and Bill Finger, and I mean Steve Ditko's family is a. They were obviously just trying to get some money out of Marvel, which I mean, for all intents and purposes, they deserve.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Ditko had a big, huge hand in creating the Spider-Man that we know and love today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a really interesting thing. I mean, we could probably talk for 3 hours about that alone.
And we tend to do that. So yeah. Well, I will say this. If there's anyone that would wear the nice velvet jackets and leave someone in the dust, it's the two artists here. Joel and Rogerio would love to go to a movie premiere and leave me at home penniless. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No.
If I get my name mentioned after I'm dead, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, but like just returning to Texas Blood, I think that you have taken a different approach when it comes to Image books. Like I haven't seen anything Western related before, and you have a kind of unique unique view on the way you build your characters there. Like you're not in a rush for anything. You're slow paced, and they are gradually becoming something bigger, which I think it's great when it comes to a nice story. How did that happen on Image? Because it's not usually the way they build those stories. It's not the thing that made them famous for. And how did you take that tour?
Well, I mean, the first thing to really talk about is the fact that Image just gives creators, just you can do whatever you want. It's they really are they're a great publisher to work with as a creator. The only notes that we get are right before we publish or whatever print whatever we're printing that month, whatever issue is. Like the only thing that we get notes on is if I have too many commas in a sentence, or if I misspell a word. Those are the only notes we get. They never comment on story. And in fact, I don't honestly know often if they like what we're doing or not. But until after the arc is out, and then I get like an email that says, "Really enjoyed reading this one, Chris and Jacob." And okay, cool, all right. So they like what we're doing. But in terms of, how we kind of came up with, I was kind of thinking about that before, just in terms of because I just read a review for issue 12, which is coming out this month. And, this was something that was even talked about in the first couple issues, was like this supernatural feeling. Is there something supernatural in this series? Is there not? I love that this is like a constant thing that people are discussing. Because the one thing that we try to do in our series is try to make it as realistic as possible and realistic within the world of the comic, I guess, really. But like, I try to make it feel as genuine as possible, and I think that that's what I mean by real, is just genuine. And in the real world, with supernatural stuff, it's you don't know if it exists or not. So right. I kind of like that. That's like that can be my argument for people feeling like there may be something supernatural in the series, and I'll just be like, well, maybe, it may not be. I'm an agnostic. Or maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to reveal.
I was just going to say, do you think you will reveal it, or you think this is one of those, hey, it's up to your interpretation?
I've said before, and I'll say it again, I think that horror and crime go hand in hand. And so for me, they're really brother and sister, brothers in general. I really do think that those are two genres that really go together well. I find serial murderers, for example, very scary. Those will tend to keep me up at night just as much as any ghost story. So I do think that they're sort of simpatico in that way. And yeah, I'm not gonna reveal anything because as a reader, I wouldn't want to know before I read anything. But I do think that those two genres sort of go hand in hand. So the fact that people are sort of detecting or feeling any particular way about our series in terms of supernatural and crime and how they feel about it's saying all the right things to me, because that's what I would want out of a book, to have the feel of something and not necessarily going all over the top.
Sean
also, yeah, that's true. There was the issue 1 variant cover, which was a dream sequence that he was referencing.
Is that in the trade in the back? I'm curious.
Yeah, it should be in the back. Yeah, it's a zombie.
Oh yeah,
I think it's kind of cool because it almost looks like a trading card from like the 90s.
Yeah, it's really cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, which was just really cool to have Sean do a cover for us. As amazing as it is to work with Jacob on every single issue.
Yep.
And Randy seeing his brother in issue 2. Yes, that is very much a supernatural element. That was more or less me sort of tipping my hat to Hamlet, which was sort of a influence on the second arc. in which Hamlet sees his father, his deceased father, who reveals that he was murdered.
I have a question on, inspiration for the story, because I got strong, like Coen Brothers, like No Country for Old Men vibes, out of some of this. Did that have any inspiration on you, or is that just my brain as I'm reading it, feeling that?
The honest answer is not really, but I do love that movie. It just so happens that we both have sheriffs in our things, and also it takes place in exactly the same place. The reason why I set our story in West Texas is because I have a good friend who's from West Texas, and where I'd spent time was where he grew up, which is Marfa and Fort Davis and Alpine. And where did they shoot No Country for Old Men? Marfa, Fort Davis, and Alpine. So I had the great fortune of sort of spending time in that area and getting to know that area. And in fact, a lot of the people that were in that movie are locals. So that's really cool. In fact, the guy with the eye patch that we have featured in issue 1, who was sitting on the porch with the rattlesnake, that scene, he's a real guy in Marfa. I made sure that Jacob knew the man that I'm talking about. His name was Ty Mitchell. And he's actually in True Grit, this guy.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I just knew him because he was the guy who ran a bar called the Lost Horse, which we renamed and homaged in our place called the Lost Soul. So a lot of it's just based off of the real places in Marfa and Fort Davis mostly. But that said, I am a gigantic Coen Brothers fan. I love them. Yeah. In fact, I was literally right before I jumped on this, I was reading about the new Tragedy of Macbeth, the new Joel Coen movie.
Oh, nice.
Which he did solo with that Ethan. But I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, there's another quality, unusual quality, I must say, to your main character. He's on his 70s, and does that have any connection to your dad? Because I know your dad is around 80 or something.
I think so.
And we never see like, let's say, heroes at that age on comics, or barely on TV sometimes. What would be that connection? Would be some kind of personality related, or just a father figure? What would that? How did that work for you?
I mean, it was kind of, I guess it was based off of my father in some ways, for sure. I mean, just sort of, experiencing, an older man in the sort of twilight of his years. Hello, Marshall. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I still I sort of have I've had a weird relationship with my father, so it's sort of seeing that and sort of trying to understand who he is, sort of piecing together who this man is that I've known for the last 20 years, 30 years, and sort of figuring out who he was for the other 50 years that he was alive, and what led him to be the person that he was, and like how he treated me when I was a kid and how he treats me now and all that. And I feel like that sort of influenced how I write Joe Bob in a way, in trying to figure out, okay, this guy acts this way when he's 70. How does he act when he's 30 in 1981? And sort of all that. But for me, the real interesting thing about Joe Bob is that he's a very haunted figure, and he's very much filled with regret, and I think that's very much inspired by me, because that's just me in a nutshell. I still think about things from like I'm really happy to hear that, because I've never loved a character that I've written like I like Joe Bob. I've never connected with a character so fully before, and just sort of fall into the writing of him effortlessly.
When it becomes a film adaptation, because it probably will, who are you casting as Joe Bob as the actor?
I feel like I know this answer before he says it, but yeah.
Well, if you're thinking Sam Elliott, the answer would be that would be amazing.
Yes.
He has the look. He has the look for sure. So when I was trying to get a short film made, Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Regret is a great motivator. Thor. Signed Thor. What was I saying?
When you're trying to get a short film made, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was trying to do that, I mean, so he was actually younger at that point. I had him as 50. And then at some point, I decided that it would be better if he had more time to regret things. So I aged him up to 70, which I think just made everything better. I don't think it would have been fine at 50, but having him at 70, it's so much more. He just has it has a lot more gravitas, just talking about everything that he's been through, rather than somebody who's sort of literal, like the middle age, 50.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, but I would have gone with Sam Neill. Was my choice. I wanted Sam Neill. I know that he's a Kiwi, but I thought he would have been an interesting choice. I think that the way that he plays, just even in Jurassic Park, I forget his character's name, Grant.
Grant, Dr. Grant.
He was Red October also. I was just watching that this week. So yeah, right.
Yeah, he's a great actor. I mean, I love him, and I think that the way that he plays Grant, though, in particular, he's very I don't know. He has a quiet, sincerity. There you go. That's exactly the word I was thinking of. Yeah. That's really cool to hear.
That's some praise right there. Yeah.
I mean, it is really cool to hear that so many people connect to Joe Bob so well. I mean, I like I said, I connected with him in a way that I've never connected with any of my characters before. I connected with a lot of my characters, especially in the second arc. I really felt like that one sort of just came out like lightning in some ways. It just kind of shot out of my brain, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what this is. Like all the Eversol stuff, which was a character who had pre-existed in another. I had actually written another thing that he was featured in where he was older. So that's another fun thing about sort of writing all these different characters and sort of putting them in different stories, is that I already know where they wind up. So I know where Joe Bob, goes eventually, and I know, where Eversol goes eventually. So I kind of have things figured out in a way, so I'm able to write them in a way that I'm, I can kind of head them in a trajectory and, set their trajectory and get them going in a certain way. Flores, for example, I know where she's going. Joe Bob, obviously. And we started talking a little bit about Joe Bob's son in the new arc. We mentioned him in one issue, and he's going to come to play a little bit at some point.
Spoiler.
So there's a lot of stuff. It's not really a spoiler.
No,
he's like it's like a throwaway line in a diner scene. There's a lot of diner scenes in the new arc.
Do you think there's a new trend coming over? I mean, there are some great films, some great stories, popping up everywhere, and they are more people related. Like people don't want to see buildings falling down, or a car exploding, or people shooting people. Do you think there's a new kind of wave to story that can connect and touch people?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm glad you like Eversol. But I mean, I think probably just our day and age sort of influences that. I would bet. I would think that there's so much going on in our world that is just so toxic and so, I don't know, just bleak. Our world is bleak, and we didn't see other people for a year and a half, a year, however long it was for you. You can Zoom with people like we're doing right now, which is nice and it's fine. But I mean, not talking to people, like I just went to my first Comic-Con or festival in England, which was actually weird. That the first thing I went to was in England, not in the States. But that was the first time that I really met fans of the comic, and totally different experience than just getting emails or tweets or Instagram messages with people telling me they liked it, because all of a sudden they're real people. They're not just messages. They're not just black and white words. So I think that might be a part of it in terms of if there is more sort of human elements to stories. Maybe it's just that people want that human element right now, because they maybe feel distant from other people and they were separated from them for so long. That might be a part of it. I know that in our new arc, there's a lot of stuff that was sort of influenced by 2020 for me personally that I didn't even intend on putting in a comic, and then I realized not until like right before release. I sent it to a friend and he was like, "Oh yeah, you really got a 2020 in there," and I'm like, shocked. But yeah, I don't know. It's for me though, it was very much sort of a classic sort of noir trope, a guy, how many noir movies there's a guy stumbles in with a bullet in his stomach and he goes, and they're like, "What happened to you?" And he's like, "Sit down, let me tell you the story." And then he tells you in flashbacks the entire thing of what happened and why he's dying right now. So that sort of was the driving factor in how he. So if you haven't read the second arc is essentially told in flashback a lot of the time. So It's set in 1981, but it's told through the eyes of modern day Joe Bob, looking back at a specific crime that was very haunting to him and still haunts him to this day.
It's great.
So that's really what that was about. But
it's
basically a classic noir.
Awesome.
I'm working on the next arc right now, and I thought about doing a similar thing with sort of the wraparound sort of flashback back and forth kind of thing. But I think, because it's set in 1992, because I wanted to explore. So we mention in the very first issue what happens to Sheriff Sam, who we spend a lot of time with in the 1981 arc. So we know that he dies by the hand of his brother, as told in the dream sequence. And, so I wanted to kind of explore when Joe Bob sort of became sheriff after Sam, and so he was sort of handed the reins, but then he has to run for office. That's how it happens. You have to run to become sheriff, just inherit the role. You might be a temporary sheriff until one can be elected. So that's that's something I would love to talk about, is Jacob Phillips, who is a fantastic artist.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was honestly, this was another thing that Jacob and I would I'm assuming it's Sergio. What Sergio just mentioned, which was Jacob, for the 1981 stuff, he did traditional inks, which he usually does digital inks. So he did traditional inks and he colored it flat versus, a more, I can't think of the word, but a more
digital.
Yes.
More gradation. Gradation.
So we were talking about how we're going to do the 90s is in the comic. So that's something that's an interesting thing for us to explore, in the creation of this 90s world, in versus an 80s world versus a 2021 world versus in our Christmas issue, which comes out in December, which won't be collected. So if you're not picking up floppies, make sure you pick up 13.
I was going to ask that. I don't want to go on a tangent on that, but didn't you say it was also almost kind of standalone? It
is a standalone, yeah.
Okay.
So it is a standalone. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Wes Greer, the great reviewer for Comics The Gathering, but Wes was in our corner from the very beginning. And so when it came time to name this character, one of the things that I do is I try to find names that I think sound real, and I really love the idea of a guy in Texas named Buster, because there was a guy, I was in Texas in June and into July, right before the Delta variant. So I was there for the 4th of July, and there was a guy who was letting us know, because we were on a mountain. There was a guy who would come by in his pickup truck and tell us if we could cross this river or not, because we had to cross a river in a pickup truck. And this guy would come along, and guess what the guy's name was? Buster. So I was like, I love the idea of this guy named Buster. And, what better last name than the man who was in our corner from the very start, Greer. So Wes Greer has a little nod in our 13th issue, which is also our Christmas issue. I love that our 13th issue is our Christmas issue.
Right.
Love it.
Are you still thinking of a 30-issue arc, or are you looking to go beyond that now at this point?
I like that I was so naive saying 30 issues. I think we're probably going to go longer, just because I'm not good at writing short issues.
You're going to go for 3. That's Mark, right? 25 years from now, 314 will be coming out. So there you go.
Joe Bob won't be around in 25 years, but
well, that's true.
Got to take him down at that mark. So,
yeah. Like the story of that Texas blood, in terms of like the 20th century, in terms of like Bob and his story in Ambrose County. Because, in a large part, he plays a part in most of the stories in some way, whether he's the lead or not, but he's always there. So in terms of seeing him, I think that it will be somewhere around 30. Whether it's going to be 30 exactly, I don't know. It might be 35, it might be 40. I liked 30 because it was an even number. Well, we'll see. We'll see. If I can fit it in 30, that would be cool, because that'd be, think about it. You could do... you have it's like the perfect number. If you do 6 issues per arc, which we might even, for the 3rd arc, I'm debating on whether to do 8 issues. But if we do 6 issues per arc, that means we have 5 trades, right? So that it would work out in that way. But I think that we might end up going over anyway. Just like I said, because I'm literally thinking about doing 8 issues for this new arc, just because there's a lot going on, and I don't want to rush any particular parts of it. Yeah. So I want to make sure that we tell the story well and continue telling it with the pace that we've established, so we're not rushing anything. Everything continues to have that breathing room that is just a very Texas part of it. It's very true to Texas. So
I've been to Texas once for a work training, and it's 100%. Like, it's just like, we're from New England up here, and it's like boom, 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 like you just, like, people are crazy, like there's just no stopping. And in Texas, it was just so different. Just the laid back, attitude, and you definitely capture that in the book. But it's funny that you've talked about the slower build, right? And obviously that is the case, but as I was reading it, I didn't feel that way, because you get so engrossed in the characters, so I'm not thinking I'm reading about, reading all these conversations happening where they're just talking about stuff. I'm just like so into what they're saying. So
yeah, well, that may have been the case if you're reading the trade, though. I think that people reading floppies might have felt like it's slow, because
this is true.
They're sort of getting like a slower sort of, and then it when it ends, they're like, oh, but I wanted to find which seems to have been the case with this last arc. We had a couple cliffhanger endings, and people were going, I want the next I want to find out what happens. And which it's kind of fun, but that, like I said before, that's kind of the fun about having the trade, is that you're able to just sit there with a single volume and just be able to read it. And I do think that I probably do write in a more, I don't want to, this sounds so like, for lack of a better word, douchey, but like in a novelistic way. So, I think that probably in a single volume it works pretty well, but I like the idea of it being monthly, and I like kind of having the the letters column, and including emails, because I actually got one letter from a fan, And it actually wasn't sent directly to me. It was actually to my comic shop, which was kind of fun. So I got an Instagram message, and my comic shop was like, "I got a letter for you," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I got a letter for you." Okay, but yeah, that's kind of the fun thing about the floppies is that we're able to have a letter column, and I'm able to address certain things that I thought were interesting about that issue. So in like the floppies for the first full arc, I talked about the influences in that big time, and the same thing with the second arc. Yeah, I don't know. It's that's kind of the fun part about the floppies, but I do think that probably just in terms of readability, it might be it's not better exactly, but it probably reads well as a trade, you know.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think of that. I mean, it clearly, yeah, because when one issue ends, I'm just going right to the next, and it's just continuous. So, but yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so I had something I was going to say, and I lost my thought there. So you guys can go here.
I can't cut you off here.
I don't like cutting people off, so you know, I had a thought in my head, and then it left. So
I was about to ask you, how is your relationship with your artists? Like, did you have to change some lines just to fit the art style? Is like how do you prepare your pages? Like, it's something that it has to be the way you have envisioned, or you're kind of, you know, like malleable to it.
Yeah, no, I hold Jacob at gunpoint. I mean, I write my scripts pretty. They're really descriptive, and I write down to like angles. So you know, and I'll write like, you know, we're behind the coffee table, and you know, we're low angle, and we're looking up, and we can see this and then the other thing. So I'm very descriptive, and I feel like that gives Jacob a good starting point, and that's what I always say to him is that, you know, don't take my descriptions, my, you know, panel description, with a plastic gun,
with a plastic squirt gun, yeah.
I mean, I always tell them, like, don't take my panel descriptions as, you know, the gospel. You know, I want you to be able to make things different, because that's collaboration, and B, we're literally both creators on this, you know. So I maybe write the first version of it, but he definitely writes the second version of it, and then we reconvene, and then when we do our revisions, we come up with the third version of it. That's kind of how I think of it. But I mean, does he tend to do what I write? Yes. But, you know, he tends to change. You know, if an angle doesn't work for him, he'll change things a little bit here and there. But it's generally what I do. But I've never had to change dialogue. A couple times he's forgot to put dialogue in, and it turns out that it actually works better without it. Or I'll see it, and then he'll go, "Oh, I forgot to put the dialogue in," and I'm like, "No, leave it out. I like it better without it. I actually think it works better," which is kind of how I'm always thinking, because I'm always revising my scripts right down to when he's drawing it. I'm literally changing dialogue. So I'll be changing, you know, panel descriptions right up until I send them to him. And then after that, I pretty much keep things locked in terms of the visual, the image. But I'll still be changing dialogue and be taking things out and things like that.
And he's still doing everything, right? He's doing the pencils, the ink, the color, the word. So he's doing.
Yeah. He has a color assistant, Pitt Martin, who's a great colorist, big Simpsons fan. So she's great, but and she's finally getting credit on issue 13, which is cool. Nice. She's been around, but I don't know why she hasn't been credited before, but now she's been credited, which is cool. I have my own podcast on our Patreon account. It's not the best thing in the world, but, you know, I talked to creators on it, and I actually think for next month I might want to talk to her just to introduce her to people and have them understand what she does. So anyway, but I don't even know what I was saying. What was I saying? Jake. I was going to say Jacob though. I was going to talk about Jacob. I was going to say Jacob is. I mean, so I met him for the first time when I went to the UK to this festival that I went to in October, and you know, it was literally like meeting an old, like seeing an old friend. You know, because we started off very much as, you know, I was the person who hired him. He was doing work for me, which was when I was making a short film, and he did concept art for me. That was very much how our relationship was at the start. But, you know, we sort of kept in touch a little bit, so we were like familiar with each other. And then when I asked him if he wanted to try and do this as a full comic book series, we really, you know, because it's a much more intimate medium in anyway, but we really started talking a lot more, you know, in terms of just creative stuff, you know, creating the world, creating characters. What should this look like? What should this look like? What should that T-shirt say? Things like that. And then we talked so much that way that we basically ended up talking about our everyday lives. And then now we basically talk every day. And, you know, for example, yesterday I met my niece for the very first time. She's about less than a week old.
Oh, wow.
And I'm messaging Jacob while I'm at the house, you know, just sending pictures of my niece. So we very much became friends. So actually meeting him in person was really cool. We actually ended up working a little bit on issue 12 together in the same room, which was fun.
Right.
It was almost finished, but, you know, I sort of was like looking at stuff and being like, oh, this maybe should be over here. And he's like, oh, yeah. And then when we were putting together the back matter, he would ask me, like, what do you think about this? And I'd be like, you know, give him like what I think. And then he tells me he thinks that we figure it out, and then we put it. So that was kind of a fun thing about actually being in the UK and being in the same room.
Yeah.
But I mean, in general, it's been a fantastic collaboration. And I mean, I just think that we're just very simpatico in a lot of ways. I mean, we're both just Simpsons nuts, and please bring back the Rattlers baseball team. Well, people have to buy them, Sergio. That's the problem. We put them up there, nobody bought them. But the Welties they're actually, I've sold more in the last month than I've sold ever. For some reason, people want we have a shirt in which it's Joe Bob says well a lot.
Yeah.
So we have a shirt that is Joe Bob looking down a well.
It's called the Welty. I love it.
Yeah. And it was that was one of the ads that I imaged to run that they never ran. Which maybe that says something about my copywriting skills. But I wanted it to be a mimic of, there's a very famous VW ad which says lemon and then it has a Volkswagen Beetle on it.
Yep, I'm familiar with that.
And so that was our take on that. It looks like just me and you, Joel.
Oh no, what's going on?
Oh, I could say everybody. Hopefully they're still there.
Is Chris not hearing us?
They're cutting over here for me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I thought it was me with a delay, but I think there might be a connection issue on your end, Chris, if you can't hear.
I can hear you now.
That's all right.
Okay.
Everything
Cool.
says it's good now.
Yeah. I wanted to say, I freaking love Jacob's lettering in these books. I love, like, you don't see it very often. Like, we have like the text bubbles for characters like going behind each other and stuff. Like, I just love the style of it. I pointed out to these guys too, because obviously we make our own comics. I'm like, man, I dig how this looks. How you have like a character's box go up in the middle, and then the other characters go behind it, and I just think it has a really cool look to it. So,
yeah, there's one in particular. I think it's issue 3. And I only know this because I was just looking at the trade briefly before, but in which the forget his name now, but he's a character who owns the Lost Soul, the bar, and he's smoking a cigarette, and it was his dialogue balloon was literally covering half his face, as if it was like his cigarette smoke.
That's awesome.
So that I mean, whether I'm not sure that everybody likes that, but for me, I think that's a really interesting use of the dialogue balloon.
Yeah, right there. This one right here. Yeah, it's just like part of the smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting use of space in a panel.
Yeah, a lot of the artists miss out on thinking about that and lettering and how the lettering goes into the art. And we were talking with Ian Chase Nichols about that, like getting more involved with that, with the lettering as part of the actual image versus being on top of the image. Like, how do we make it interact with the world, right? And that is something I think a lot of creatives aren't thinking about, but it seems to start being more of that. It's like when, Todd first went outside the panel with the webs of Spider-Man, and we're starting to get more interesting text and things, which is cool to put it in the art itself, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's frozen there again?
No, I'm good. I can hear you guys. Am I frozen?
No.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I was just going to say, I think that it's interesting that it's like, I think that it's definitely being finally recognized more as the art form that it is,
Yeah.
It's funny just being, like more active in terms of comic Twitter and Instagram and all that, and sort of just seeing the sort of the fight to be recognized for colorists, letterers. It's unfortunate that they aren't looked at as integral parts of the creative process in which they are. I'm just fortunate that my book has one guy doing all of it, so he doesn't have a problem being credited. In fact, maybe he is, because I think people look at him as a penciler more than anything. But really, I mean, he's doing all of the heavy lifting on that book, aside from the writing, which I do, and I guess whatever Pip does in the color assisting. But he's doing most of the work and all of the work in terms of the artistic portion of the book, in terms of illustration, and I feel like his contribution as a letterer and as a colorist is sort of sometimes overlooked, when I think that when you look at the fact that he's literally doing all of it, it's a whole package deal where otherwise other books you're seeing various collaborators working at various facets of the of the book. So
I feel like the casual reader too just takes it for granted when they're reading it, like I don't know if they recognize when lettering is like incredible, and now that like we're creating our own comics, I'm like looking out for that stuff. So like, I get fascinated by styles when they look different and unique, and they just fit the story. And so that's my thought. I just think a lot of people don't even pay attention to that, and it's unfortunate because that can add so much to the book. So
I sure agree. Like if you have a bad letter, like you can't just screw up your page. From my point of view, when I'm doing the drawings, I have to think about the mass of those texts would take on the page, and like I do the lettering as well, and I don't consider myself a good letterer because I don't study it, and you have to study it. But I tried to make the lettering as, let's say, it has to be something to add to the story instead of robbing the image from the reader, if you know what I mean. Because sometimes when you don't calculate that, like you can screw the page up very easily. And choosing the right letter to do your stuff, it's something that we should consider later on. I mean, in Livid, later on when we get like rich and famous, we could pay some letter to do that.
Well, I want to just like give an example of what I'm referring to. Like you see this page right here. Like I just love how just like the conversation flows across the panel, you know. And I don't know. That's just an example. I just opened up to try to find an example, but
I love the white background there.
Yeah,
I've heard you talk to that, Chris, too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I mean, I probably didn't include a very descriptive background in that panel, but that may have played into why Jacob said, "I'll leave this background blank." But I also just think that Jacob is brilliant in sort of thinking about things like that and going, what's important here is the acting of the characters, what's happening with the characters, you know. And so I think that's a big part of, you know, what a penciler does, and what I think that Jacob does so amazingly is the acting. One of the things I'm always complimenting him on is the acting that he captures for, you know, Joe Bob, for example, because there's like lines that I write, and so I like to read stuff aloud when I'm writing it. But you know, seeing it come to life in how Jacob draws it is, it's really interesting to see. You know, he might change like you can almost see like the inflection being different than what I had imagined, and I'm like, that works so much better. You know, he just what he does is he brings the characters to life in a really interesting way. I mean, literally, I you know, Eversol was a character who I had envisioned a certain way, and then he drew him, and then I was like, oh yeah, that is Eversol. You know, he based off of a character named Kolchak, and I was basically just imagining Kolchak in my mind because it's you know, it's black and white. It's just, you know, I get to imagine whatever I want to imagine. He's got to bring it to life, and obviously he's not allowed to just draw Kolchak into a comic book because that would be illegal. So we had to come up with our own sort of take on it, and he's so amazingly, you know, we had included him in issue 1. It's a newspaper clipping, and he looked different than he eventually looks. And the reason why is that as Jacob was drawing, he had rewatched a great movie by David Fincher, Zodiac, which was it's a favorite of mine as well.
Oh, it's amazing.
And he said, oh, I think he should look a little bit more like Robert Downey Jr. And it was like, good idea. I'm like, I'm down. Let's do it. So that's kind of how we did that. Yeah, I don't know. That's a big part of it that I think that a lot of people. I don't know if they don't think about it. If they don't think about it, I mean, it probably just speaks to the talent. But I mean, a lot of it comes down to him looking at his face in the mirror and figuring out like, oh, this is how the face looks for this particular emotion, and this is, you know, whatever. But you know, I mean, in this latest arc, I mean, there's a lot of like, you know, crime and, you know, bordering on horror stuff that happens, but it's like a lot of it is just human emotion and drama, and the stuff that he captured so amazingly well. I don't know. You know, it's one thing to write it in black and white. It's another thing to bring it to life. And yeah, I don't know. It's something I really hope that Jacob is recognized in awards ceremonies next year, because I really do think that he did a fantastic job on this arc, and especially the fact that he really did a lot of the work very fast because he actually got COVID, and we were behind on all of our deadlines for the majority of the time. The only one we were ahead on was actually issue 13, which we thought we were behind on.
Wow.
But there was this paper shortage, and they ended up pushing us back a week. So they pushed our deadline back a week, and all of a sudden we were like, oh, well, we had more time. We didn't know it. Thank God we liked what we did. But
yeah.
You know.
No, it's crazy. Like for a series that has so much conversation and just, you know, people chatting, like that, he can capture that emotion on every panel. So I agree 1,000%. I mean, I hope he gets recognized for that, because like literally, you know, and I sat there, you know, as a creator trying to critique, like what is he doing that's nailing this, like is it just the angle of the eyebrows, like what, like he just nails the facial expressions in the panels to what they're saying. It's crazy.
Well, I think part of it is what you pointed out about the backgrounds. For one thing, is that he knows not to clutter a panel when you shouldn't be looking at the background, which is, I mean, one of the golden rules is, don't block the important action, which if you watch the Star Wars movies, if you've ever seen the special editions, you'll know that George Lucas had a Jawa walking by, like in a scene when he shouldn't be walking by, and he says, "Oh, it's more like real life," and it's like, well, no, George, it's a movie. You're blocking the scene in which the thing is happening. That's important for for dialogue and progressing character and progressing story. This is not anything to really dig on George Lucas, but more so in terms of just understanding how to tell a story and tell it well. I think that's what Jacob really cracked in terms of knowing how to get those emotions out in a book that is largely, like you said, conversations, which I think that might for another artist, maybe it would be difficult for them to sort of try to figure out how to crack that sort of nut, whether it would be more difficult for them, whether it'd be easier. A lot of people thrive on action, and we don't have a lot of action in our stories. I mean, there's definitely action-packed moments, but they're definitely punctuated by a lot of the silent moments, which is the stuff for me where things become genuine. Like I've mentioned before, like one of my favorite scenes that I've written was there's a dining room scene in which Joe, Bob, and Martha are having dinner. And like he says something well, and then she says well back. It's like sort of a nice scene. In which you sort of just understand the characters in a single moment, and that whether I wrote it well or not is not even really the case, because Jacob just totally brought it to life. It goes from being black and white, skeleton of a scene, and it becomes real when he brings it to life in full color.
Yeah.
And the colors that he uses also are really brilliant. And I think that the blank space, the negative space backgrounds that he does, really just drive it. It's driving your eye to the acting.
I agree.
That's great. I got the impression that you are 100% invested in Texas Blood, but yes. I know writers are never satisfied. It's like something that never ends. Like it is a hole. There's no end. There's no bottom to it. And have you got any side ideas during this period while you are creating stories for Texas Blood, or is just it at this moment?
I mean, we would love to do an Eversol spinoff, which would be fun, but that wouldn't necessarily be in Texas. That could be anywhere, and especially the character he mentions that he's from Iowa. He lives in LA, but he sort of travels around when he needs to. He's a private investigator. It's part of the nature of his job. So that would be sort of a thing that we think would be fun, because A, we love the character. B, getting to explore different time periods and different places would be really fun. To write a comic about, like someplace in Wyoming, someplace in Montana, someplace, I don't know, Alaska. To write a weird sort of 3-part. I love those sort of BPRD stories and whatever, but to do like a 3-part like story set in Hawaii with Eversol would be really fun. Which is something that we can't do with that Texas Blood, but we could do with an Eversol spin-up. Another thing that we do want to explore, which I think after the 3rd arc we might do. This is the thing I don't want to get your hopes up, but we're thinking about either doing So we started a digital comic on the Patreon called Brutal Dark, and we only did 3 issues, and then we had to stop because Texas Blood had to take precedence. We didn't know we were going to be going back on in production as soon as we did. So we ended up having to put that on hold, and at this point, it's on hold a year. So we definitely want to finish that story, and I think that how we would want to finish that would be through, publishing a graphic novel, probably an Image. I don't know where else we would have it. So we would want to do that, and that would have to be done separately of that Texas Blood, because Jake would have to have time to work on it. And keep in mind, he's also doing New Burn, so in scheduling, it's a little tricky. But we do want to try to do maybe there's an Old West thing that we kind of want to do in terms of that Texas Blood, which is more directly inspired by the events of that Texas Blood. So we get to explore deep cut in the Ambrose County history, which would be very fun to do. Sort of, explore a little bit, which we'll get a little bit more in the main title, but it would be fun to do that in a separate story and sort of flesh it out and flesh out that time period.
I think House of Nerds is trying to end our show for us. No, I'm just kidding. We are at the hour mark, though, for real. But I just wanted to ask before, I've been looking at this whole show. I see it in the background there on your bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
So, are you, it's what inspired me to write. I read it in 8th grade. That's when I knew I wanted to be a writer. But are you a big Stephen King fan, or is that just a random Stephen King book that just happens to be in the
No, that's
the
the Stephen King shelf. So.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Nice.
And there's more where that came from.
I have behind this fancy Livid banner, it's a cement wall, but I have a bookshelf with 3 rows of Stephen King stuff, like 2 rows of hardcover, and then some paperbacks. So that's cool. I kept seeing that, and I had to bring it up. So
yeah, no, I'm a big Stephen King fan. I love him. I think it's fantastic. I love it as a novel, especially because I think that it's mean and dirty, and he tries things and they sometimes fail, but when it works, it really works. And I just think that it's such a fascinating piece of prose. I really think it's really great. Because I love that it's like his greatest book and his worst book simultaneously. There's so many like good things in it, and there's so many things that are just like, what people make fun of Stephen King for. There's so many of those things in it too, but that's what makes it great. It doesn't take away from it. It doesn't make it a lesser book. And in my mind, it makes it a greater book. And the fact that it's literally 1,000 pages, it's 1,138 pages or something like that. Which is, that sort of just speaks to the talent of Stephen King. I love him. I have, I still have a bunch of books that my parents have to get from them, from when I was moving around. So I have like Skeleton Crew and, all those.
Nice.
I have to get my copy of Cujo from them, actually, because I want to reread it. Anyway.
I brought Stephen King up. We're not on a
Thanksgiving. We're having that there.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw my last question to you now.
Stephen King conversation.
It's not that
sure.
deep. But I'm very curious about the feeling that we get when we are creating something, and I'm very curious about the different approaches the authors have to their own works. And I would like to ask you, what is the best part of your job? Is the act of creating? Is writing it? It's seeing your works in people's hands? Is reading the reviews? What would that be? What's the best part?
The most nerve-wracking part is reading the reviews. I love the act of writing. I love I sort of just love having written something and being able to look at that and say like, hey, I did it, and having something and looking at it and rereading it going, oh, that's not bad, is also pretty good. But for me, in terms of comics, sending a script to Jacob and not only having it make sense to him, but having it translate into something that is as I don't know, something that just I would want to read as a reader is probably the best part for me in terms of creating a comic book. Just seeing those pages come in, there's nothing more magical than that. You know, seeing what you wrote, which you just conjured up out of your mind. Maybe, you know, you had influences here and there, but, you know, seeing it come to life, that's probably, you know, just seeing characters that you had in your mind that never had a real face, you know, seeing them come to life it's really special. I'd say there's some magic to that, you know. I'd say there's some magic to the whole enterprise of writing, but yeah.
It's a kind of hype, isn't it?
I agree with Chris 1,000%. Like when Joel and Rogerio are drawing two different series, and every time they'd send a panel or a page, I'm like,
I think I lost you.
Yeah, you froze there. Are you good?
Okay, I can hear. Okay.
Yes, back. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, it could. You know, I know we passed the hour mark. If you're pretending that you lost service to end the show, we can. I'm kidding.
No, I lost you there for a minute, but now you're all good.
Oh, you heard that? Oh shit!
I don't know. My internet says it's fine. I don't know why.
Yeah. That happens. It's usually one of us three that has the connection issues. So
yeah, I'll just do that.
Oh man, I forgot what we were saying, but
I don't know. It's with again, like usually it will tell me when the connection's not good, and it says the connection's good.
Could be ghosts, could be poltergeist. We don't know.
Yeah. I don't. Can you hear us right now, Chris? Or
No.
Let's give him a sec. We'll give the outro here in a second. Hopefully you can hear us so we can at least say our goodbyes. But please don't leave. No, I'm just. Can you hear anything, Chris?
Force majeure, act of God. That's what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is this is an act of God telling us that.
No.
End it. No. Yeah. Well, right. Can you hear us for now? Can you hear us right now so we can say our goodbyes?
Should we call it a night?
Yeah. We can wrap up.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. We can hear you.
I'm gonna hang up and come back on.
Okay.
You can do that.
We can do that real quick.
Yeah. What a cool series, though, right? I mean, that's amazing that Jake's doing all that work. Like, I feel like that's the same, right? Doing the penciling, the ink, and the coloring, the lettering, right? I mean, and to do that in that frequency and that line, put that book out. I mean, that's incredible. It's out that rapidly, right? So how what kind of work be? Yeah, it's something. You know, it's a testament to their drive to get this done. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
And I'm telling you,
so if you guys can hear me. You guys are cutting out for me. I don't know why, but I just want to say thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you
for chatting, Chris. But also thank you everybody who listened and watched. Issue 12 comes out this week. Issue 13 is out next month. Make sure you pre-order it.
It's awesome.
Will do.
And that's me, I guess. This is very strange because right now I'm talking